Hi, and welcome to Module 1. In this course, not surprisingly, I suppose, we will be exploring the fundamentals of educational research. After all, that's the name of the course. What does it actually mean to do research? How is that different than any other information gathering we may engage in every day? How can we ensure our actions are ethical as researchers? How do we actually do research, and for what purpose? So we're going to begin this exploration of these various questions in Module 1. And by the end of this course, my goal is that you will feel much more confident about your ability to pursue your research question thoughtfully, knowledgeably, and ethically. To help us in that task, we'll be using the Creswell and Guterman text. And you'll see the full title of it up here, the 6th edition. For all of the 5 editions prior, John Creswell was the single author. He's a professor at the educational psychology at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and basically he researches research and the doing of research. But in the 6th edition, he has worked with a co-author, Tim Guterman, who is an assistant professor in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Michigan. And his work represents the crossover, really, in medicine to other forms of research beyond scientific research to more qualitative forms. And I'll talk about that more as we move through this video. We'll begin with the first 2 chapters of the text for your readings, as well as an additional paper by Creswell and some videos that help further support our focus in this module. And you'll find all of those on eClass under the tab that says readings for the course. You can access all that are in the text by going to those links in Module 1. In order to become familiar with one of the key skills of a good researcher, observation, your first assignment will be to complete Part A of the observation assignment. So you'll do Part A in week 1 of Module 1, and you'll do Part B in the second week. Your instructions are, and this may be a bit frustrating, but nevertheless, there's a reason for this. Your instructions are minimal on purpose so that you experience in a small way the kinds of decisions a researcher must make when gathering data. Once that's complete, I will post instructions for Part B of the assignment, and the reasons for the rather vague instructions for this assignment will become clear then. So be watching for that, and usually students have a lot of fun with this assignment. So I hope that you do too. And it's a good start to thinking about what are the steps towards collecting good research data. At the heart of the course, at the heart of this course are 2 questions. What is research, and how do we do it well? First of all, research is a systematic, theoretically informed, it could be quantitative, qualitative, could be mixed methods, and an ethical examination of a particular phenomenon in a social context. It's also a process of steps that are used to analyze information to increase our understanding of a topic or an issue. So you first pose a question, and I'm going to talk about coming to that question a little more later on in this video. You'll review the literature to see what the literature actually says about that question. You'll specify a purpose for your research based on your general question, as well as what the literature already says and what you might want to further explore. You'll collect data, and there are various ways in which you can do that. You'll analyze and interpret that data by applying a particular theoretical lens, and all of that together becomes methodology. And then you will report and evaluate the research so that others have access to the work that you've done. Now that sounds very, very neat and tidy, doesn't it? But in fact, it's a much more complicated process than what that might suggest. But one of the things to keep in mind is that research is not opinion. It's not common sense or even previously held knowledge. Research may, in fact, confirm previous knowledge, but it also offers opportunities for seeing differently, for understanding something more deeply than you may have before, and certainly in a more complex way. Perhaps the most difficult and important step in any research project is deciding on what are we actually trying to research. Creswell and Guterman provide us with some key questions to ask ourselves as we work our way from the general to the specific in identifying our research question. So they suggest first that you identify what is the specific controversy or issue that I need to address. Oh, sorry. Got a sneak peek there. Why is the problem important? How, and important to whom, of course. How will my study add to what we already know about this problem? And that will come out of your literature review, where you'll see what we already know and then see where your study may extend that knowledge. And then who will benefit from what I learn about this problem? It could be your students. It could be students in other classrooms. It could be the administration in the school. It could be the community and offering a greater understanding about a particular phenomenon and so on. And as you do your research, therefore, you will go through a process that helps you respond to those questions by working your way through from the general to the specific question you wish to explore. So Creswell and Guterman give us an example of that process that's quite helpful, as indicated here. So they suggest that an example might be the topic, or the overall question is, I want to know something more about online learning. The research problem is, and this is maybe what's prompting that topic, the lack of students enrolled in online learning. The purpose statement becomes to study why students do not enroll in online classes at a community college. And the research questions, and sometimes there are 2 or 3 that come out of the purpose statement, and then you may choose, or you may take an overall question and look at various aspects of that question. There are various ways in which we can do this, depending on time and resources, of course. Does the use of the internet deter students from enrolling in an online class? And of course, there you can identify particular students or a particular class or a particular context, like a particular college or university and so on. So coming to your research question then is a process of refinement so that you come at last to something that is what Creswell calls researchable in the video that you'll be watching. So in my own case, for my doctoral work, I began with the general area of women in leadership. The research problem was, why are there not as many women in leadership in education as their representation would suggest? My purpose was to explore why more women do not take up leadership in educational organizations. And the specific question I explored was, what are the forms of resistance encountered by women in becoming leaders in educational organizations? Because my hypothesis, if you will, was that there must be something standing in the way. And what may appear to be fairly straightforward, however, and in my own case, and everyone I know of that does research, coming to your question can take a considerable amount of time. And one of your tasks in this course is to begin that journey in identifying your research question. And I would suggest in Module 1 that you begin sorting through some of this, so that in Module 2, when we take up this again in more detail and you have an assignment attached, you'll have already begun some of the questioning, because it does take time. We all come to research with a particular theoretical perspective or epistemological position. We come with a set of lenses, if you will, with which we examine the phenomena around us. Our lenses may be clouded or partial because they are bounded by our life experiences, but the ability to identify and critically examine the theory that shapes the lenses, here we have these lenses that have been shaped in a particular kind of way, with which we view the social phenomena, may enable us to see differently, more fully, more deeply. The key to successful research, then, is the knowledgeable use of theory. And that is what your last reading talks in greater depth about. As we become researchers, it's important that we become very self-reflective, particularly in our use of theory. Pat Thompson is a professor at the University of Nottingham and a former principal from Australia. Much of her current work explores the myriad of processes that go into writing research. She writes an excellent blog about this process as well, in which she provides a very accessible entry point into doing and writing research. Recently, she's done a series on what she calls Theory Fright. I found this title really an interesting one because several years ago when I was teaching a course called Theories of Educational Administration at the University of Victoria one summer, one of the students, as we were going around the circle and talking about what we hoped this course would accomplish, etc., etc., one of the students said, well, when I told people I was going to be taking a course on theories of educational administration, they all said, oh, that's too bad. That doesn't sound like much fun. And their comment they ended with was, theory is eerie, you know. So theory fright is a real thing. For some reason, it's seen as kind of very esoteric and kind of out there and hard. And sometimes it feels that way, to be honest. But Pat breaks it down into a kind of reasonable definition. A theory is just a way of explaining, of saying how things relate to each other, why they are the way they are, and how they relate to other things. So when you say it that way, it doesn't seem quite so eerie after all. And we'll be talking about theory throughout the course, and I hope that it won't be eerie for you either. We'll try to make sure that it's not. Theory generally, just to kind of look at it as an overview, comes out of two ways of seeing social phenomena and organizing our understanding of what we are seeing. So the broad categories of quantitative and quantitative approaches to research are the overall umbrellas that we often use for thinking about how we're approaching research. As I've already said, we will be looking at these approaches in much more detail later in the course, but let's look at some of the important points that Creswell makes in more detail in the article. First of all, quantitative or scientific research looks at variables and their quantifiable relationships with one another. The ways in which they may be related to answer a research question or form predictions or hypotheses, or a theory is used deductively at the beginning of a study to test or verify it. Qualitative or naturalistic inquiry, as it's sometimes called, recognizes that social phenomena may be understood. So we can contrast explanation to understanding more fully through ethnographic or observational research or interviews, focus groups, etc., and may be analyzed by using theoretical lenses such as critical theory, feminist theory, or may even produce theory using grounded theory. Each of these approaches and more enable the researcher to explore complex and non-quantifiable phenomena such as power and control, social relationships, cultural norms and biases, and so on. So here we have those points that as they're made by Creswell. Mixed methods are a more contemporary form of research that draws on both quantitative and qualitative theoretical approaches to both explain and understand the social phenomena. For example, in my doctoral research, I used statistical research to identify that there was indeed a disparity in the number of women and men in educational research that could not be explained by the actual numbers of men and women participating as teachers in schools across the country. I wanted to understand why this might be the case, so I turned to qualitative methods to try to understand some aspects of this phenomenon. So in a sense, I was using mixed methods with a predominance of qualitative analysis. Some use mixed methods with a predominance of quantitative analysis. So we can move back and forth. But theory may be used inductively and or deductively. So we can end with the question, why research then? Well, first of all, from my perspective and from the perspective of other researchers, research helps us to understand the world in which we live. And we can understand it using either of these kind of umbrella categories of analysis. We can understand how it's organized, how our actions affect others, how we can live well with others. And here we're moving more into qualitative analysis, how we can come to know the other, those in non-dominant society, and so on, ethnic diversity, etc., and how we can work more efficiently and effectively. And all of these are questions that are very important to us as educators as we occupy a more and more diverse world, for example, as we occupy a location of work that's becoming much more complex, with greater demands for accountability, for example, with greater fiscal responsibilities, et cetera, et cetera. So as policies around us change, so do the practices within that organization. More broadly, research can help us develop policies and governance at the local, provincial, national, and international level that work well in achieving the common good through social institutions like education. So research can influence micro, meso, and macro levels of human activity. So when we think of it this way, we understand that research is very important both to our local work in our classrooms and our schools and our communities, to the broader connections within a city or within a board level, or the much broader levels at the provincial, federal, and even international level. So I'm looking forward to taking this journey with you as we come to understand research more fully. And my goal is to provide guidance for you, but your work is to move towards becoming an independent and knowledgeable researcher in this course and those that follow. So at any time in this journey, you're more than welcome to seek assistance through email, request a Skype conversation, and so on. And I welcome those opportunities. So welcome again to the course, and I wish you all the best as you embark on a new year of study, a new course, and a new responsibility as an educational researcher.